Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, February 25th, 2025 meeting of the Air Planning Board. This hearing of the Air Planning Board will be held in person at the location provided on this notice. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation via Zoom is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with a particular interest in a specific item on this agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may access the proceedings by joining Zoom meeting ID number 978-772-8220 or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Danny Ruiz, Town Planner at druiz@air.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 144, prior to the meeting. First item of, any other members on
Jeff
that?
actually just joined.
Oh, welcome, Jeff. Zoom. Okay, so someone write this down who's here so we...
Heather will be taking this as
Yes? Okay, thank you. So the first item is to... Hey!
No, you're good.
We just started. So the first item is to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion? A motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Ken?
Aye.
Julie?
Yes.
Kathleen? Yes. Nathan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. The agenda is approved. And that takes us into really the business of the day, which is to review the OSRD bylaws. As I believe this is a combination effort, that it's training and education for us, but it's also to see if there's some things in there that we question that might need to be improved and presented as a warrant to town meeting eventually. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You want to take it away from here?
Yes. As I know, as the board wanted to start going through the bylaws, and I figured since we have this is. There's a project that's going to be coming before the planning board on March 11th, that it would be good now that myself and Heather have gone through the process of from the beginning to, getting a project to the actual starting point before the board to actually discuss what, myself and Heather have kind of seen going through the regulations and the design guidelines as well. So initially, so the biggest in review, it's 10.1, page 114.
Thank you.
And I have it up on the screen for everyone to see as well.
As part of this discussion, are we also going to get into the regulations, design guidelines?
Yes.
Okay. We will.
Yep, we will. We'll talk about those as well.
Okay,
So far, what we've learned from this process at this point with the OSRD is within our regulations.
Wait a minute, within the bylaw or the regulations?
Our bylaw. Our bylaw. It's just special regulations says right there. So I would just. There's a little bit of inconsistencies between our bylaw and what the regulations and design guidelines state. There is almost some things go against each other and aren't as cohesive as we may want it to be. And I think that's just because of the process when I believe the bylaw came first, then the regulations and design guidelines came at a later date. I'm not sure if anyone on this board was part of the process of the regulations. Were you? You were.
I think, yeah.
Everyone here was.
Julie? Nathan, maybe not.
No, okay.
But Julie definitely was, Ken was, and I was, and Jeff was too, right, Jeff? In fact, you were the chair when we went through these, right?
No, I think he's talking about.
The working group.
Oh, the working group, my apologies. No, it
I
wasn't.
recall it, the working group was Mark Ashenbo, myself, Joanne Christoph,
Yep.
and Jessica Jean.
Okay.
That's kind of the way I remember the regulations and design guidelines.
Okay.
2022, this was like 18 or 19, we changed a few things to that, but there were at least 4 of us.
But the guidelines came a couple of years
Regulations
later.
and design guidelines came 2 or 3 years after this.
After this.
After we went through the process of a couple of approvals.
Yep.
That we had to tweak a few things.
Okay.
But the bylaw basically states that you're allowed to have regulations. We didn't have it when the bylaw was passed, we put it in later.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so, you know, what I've learned at this point, so within specifically the 10.1.3 development impact and conservation analysis portion, which I can pull up on the screen for everyone to see right up here. So within this process of, and how we talk about it in here, there are, so the first one is, so prior to, so conservation analysis and findings, number one, prior to filing an application, the applicant is encouraged to meet with the planning board to discuss the conservation resources on site. At such meeting, the planning board shall indicate the applicant which land is likely to have the most conservation value and to be most important to preserve and where the development may be appropriately located. Our regulations don't state that. Our regulations have it spelled out differently. So in our regulations,
Bring them up on the screen.
oh yes, it'll be easier. So within our regulations, the way it works is, so step one is an applicant has an informal meeting with the planning board to discuss the OSRD process and conservation resources on site. Step two is the applicant prepares a conservation analysis and concept sketch and submits to them both to the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board. So on here, we don't talk about their meeting with the Conservation Commission. We actually, it's not included in this section. It's included in the design, the regulations and design guidelines. I think obviously we need to update this section to properly show the exact same process as we have for it within the design guide, the regulations and design guidelines, just so that when someone looks at the bylaw or the design guidelines, they're gonna match. Because if you just read the bylaw, the steps aren't the exact same, and you can interpret as you don't need to go to Conservation Commission for, you know, the initial portion of the process.
But in general, regulations further clarify a bylaw, and the current board or a board that it's not too far in the history, created an understanding about the bylaw, right? So is there a need for them to match? I think it would be fine that if a bylaw states something broad and then a regulation states something specific.
So I understand where you're coming from on that, but so as a developer, your initial thought is go to the bylaws first, and that's going to tell you the process of, because the process is usually within the bylaw. The regulations and your design guidelines usually are the specific portions about the plans, the conservation analysis, stuff like that. But so when it comes to application processes, you usually want them referred at least to match within a bylaw. Because if we already have one here, this one adds additional steps.
Right.
It would be better if they match.
So, one thought that I have is that before we make the effort to make them match, are we sure we're happy with the regulatory steps as they stand? So now we have experience under our belt, right? So why make it match if we find it's flawed? We want to match something that works. So I just want, I don't have any particular grievance against the process to date, but I think it's worth stepping back and think, does this still make sense? Okay, informally meets at the planning board. Notice it says planning board, not just the town planner, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is all of us to discuss the process. Okay, and so we agree with that. That's the planning board, right? All of us, we get a chance to have that informal conversation.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And then second step is the conservation analysis and concept sketch, and that comes from the applicant, correct? That they hire somebody, a third party, to prepare the conservation analysis. Is that
Their
correct?
own engineer, not a third party.
I'm sorry, their own engineer does the conservation analysis, or
Yep.
hire someone to do the
Yeah,
conservation
It could be a
analysis.
consultant,
It could be a
it's a
consultant.
third party, no matter what.
And the concept sketch from the engineer.
Goddard, and this, some consultant could be involved.
Technically, a third party, when we're talking about the town, it just usually means someone who's reviewing the
Who's not.
project. Who's
Okay.
outside.
Fair
That's
enough.
the way you, there's a good, now
That's
there's
a good point.
definition in these.
Okay.
That's interesting.
So,
Third party is usually someone outside of the town or the applicant.
Okay, cool.
so the applicant's parties, they're
Yep,
involved. do that.
Exactly.
And what's interesting is that the conservation analysis and the SCEP go to both of us, Concom, planning board. All right. And it says see section 3 below, and they don't. Okay, they did it.
Yep, and they get into the details.
Then the third step is to meet with the Conservation Commission.
Yep. Who reviews the conservation analysis along with the
And the
concept
idea,
sketch.
and their goal is to come up with a set of recommendations for the priority areas,
Yep,
high, medium, low,
yep,
that would inform how we divide what goes open space, what goes development, right?
correct.
And that's the part where we make the written conservation findings. Is that correct? We say this is the priority, we believe is the priority area, et cetera?
No, so step 4 is where the Conservation Commission, step 3 is where the Conservation Commission
I get
reviews
that.
Step 4 is then the Conservation Commission submits their recommendations
Yes.
to the planning board. Step 4, I don't know why this says 4.5, but it says that. So I'm gonna say 4.5. The planning board at that point then makes written conservation findings, which is what we did at that joint meeting.
That's what we did last meeting.
Yes. So that's that step.
Yes. Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
So, it seems to me, this is just, as we're all talking around here, that we have everything we need between the two documents.
Mhm.
Maybe it's just a case of going into paragraph 1 and delineating the fact that at this step,
Refer to this.
refer to these guidelines
That
as,
works too.
Yeah, make it simple on yourself.
so
Daniel.
you make them aware right in step 1 on the
Mhm.
bylaw that you
Please
need to
refer.
go into the regulations and guidelines for a more thorough description of the process.
Okay.
I agree. What do you,
Okay.
Nathan?
I mean, that's what I was saying.
That's what
right?
you
The
agree with?
regulations
Julie?
further explain.
Kathleen? Jeff? Are you liking that
So-
idea?
If I understand Mr. Diskin's recommendation, that is, in the first paragraph, he says we have regulations, guidelines also, refer to those. Correct?
Yeah, under B,
Right there?
10.13B, conservation
I got it.
number 1.
Yeah,
Put it,
yep, I got it.
Yep.
I mean, Ken, I look back to my own experience, and I took 9 properties through the process in Cambridge. And if I walked in not knowing what I was supposed to be doing, it was a non-starter. So it's also it's on the shoulders of the proponent to know what they're up to, know what they need to do. So I think we can lead them to water, but we can't make them drink. So I'm surprised that no, I agree. Putting it in the bylaw would serve as a service
Yes.
to a future proponent.
Yes.
And
I think it's really important that throughout the bylaws, and it doesn't matter what committee you're in, there's many references to regulations being allowed to be built by a committee later on.
Oh yeah.
So that's what happened here, but I think it is somewhat inconsistent. A lot of people just don't pick that up. So in defense of a person, an applicant, it would be easy to miss that little step.
And since we do make a considerable number of demands on the applicant, I think it's only fair that we make the process as clear as possible. I think that's fair.
Also, when I got here, it was the regulations were not in an accessible area at all. You couldn't find them on the website.
I can't see.
The only place they were was in my folder.
That's so it's
My hard copy was.
I'm trying to add as much more access so that everyone knows exactly where everything is. But I just think additional references it helps
It
everyone.
does help.
Yep, got it.
Okay.
I don't know, that's kind of the way I saw it, but
Okay,
anyone else?
General comment or question?
please.
Is this the right place? Oh, sorry, Julie, do you want to go?
No, you go first.
Often I find that there's time attached to steps like this, and both the bylaw and this seem a bit, at least from what is on the screen, like there aren't times attached.
Yeah. And there's a reasoning behind that. So There's usually only times set when an applicant makes a submission, a formal submission. Yeah, so these are not public hearings, so there's no like regulatory like set description as to what the time frame that needs to be done. Like typically with site plan review, there's deadlines, special permit, like all those have special permits because special criteria for timeframes. These are public meetings, so they're not requiring public hearings. Public hearings get to the point once we're past step 6 is basically where the timeframes then start to come in.
So in theory, these you could get to step 4.5, and then you could have a hiatus of a year.
Yeah.
Before the client.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
That could happen.
Stratton Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Okay.
Yeah.
it sounds like there's good reason for it. So.
I just want to make one quick comment before all this happens.
Yep.
The section of the bylaw we're working in is based on the fact, that we know we're trying to save open space, we know we're trying to save resources, but there's a flexibility involved.
Mm-hmm.
So the intent of this open space residential was always that the planning board would have some flexibility
Mm-hmm.
in the design process and the thought process and the changing around of the development, which we've actually done in every single case.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to remember, is that we're doing the best we can to get the order here, but it's also does have flexibility built into it.
Mm-hmm.
So we can, understand the process and think about it and make, decisions accordingly.
I think Julia.
I do, and I see Jessica's hand up too, but this is just, if we're editing things, this is little, so I don't know that I care, but in step 2 at the end, we have DIS and CA.
Yep.
And in step 1, we say planning board, comma, like, parentheses, PB.
And these don't have
These
it.
don't have them, and what's weirder is, like, development impact statement is way up at top, but if you actually go to the bottom, Danny, sorry to, in that bottom one is where we write DIS in parentheses. So
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah,
I
let's
don't,
fix
I
Okay.
mean, clearly we've existed fine like this.
Yeah, I can clean
That's a
that
Yeah,
good
up.
we're gonna be
point.
doing
I can clean that up.
something about it all.
Yeah.
It might be in the abbreviations in the.
In the definitions, it's not. I don't think it is. Not for that one.
Jeff?
Well, it is, but not the,
Not
Thank you.
not the bracket, whatever you know.
And I second Julie. DIS, I have to think about that for a moment. To set the stage, and if you all may recall, there was a time when conservation felt like they weren't being involved in the work we were doing, and we felt like we were at odds with conservation, not working with them in certain situations where it was appropriate. And so, Kathleen, that's a large part behind steps 1 through 4, 5 in this, and that is to involve conservation, get a feeling for the property, get a feeling for the priority areas, and then everybody would have clarity on moving forward with it. And yeah, sometimes it takes a long time to get this done. It's hard to do priority work in the wintertime around here. It's difficult to see what's alive and what isn't and stuff like that. So that's why there were no times. But the initial intent was to put the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board on an equal footing as we start working on these areas of our town that have more and more conservation land on them.
Potential conservation land.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah.
All right.
That actually. So, one other thing, the actual regulations always refer as a subdivision application.
That's an issue.
That's an issue because we do allow a site plan application. So that's another thing that needs to be kind of. So I think just removal of the type of application is probably the best way to deal with that, as opposed to subdivision or site plan. I don't know, unless you guys want to see me add the slash in there in site plan, I think just remove the subdivision portion of it.
Yeah.
So that's something that will need to be done throughout the whole document.
So just for reference again, the good news is we can change the regulations without going to a town meeting. That's a vote of the committee.
Yeah, so we would have a public hearing.
We do that.
Yep, there's a public hearing, legal notice, everything for that. It's done here, as opposed to the actual bylaw that goes to town meeting. Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, so like 4.5, the applicant, as guidance, submits to the applicant as guidance in developing the preliminary subdivision plan. So that's another thing, like that would actually be cleaned up and
Developing the project plan.
yeah,
Exactly.
the project plan just is a different way.
Yeah, excuse me, may I ask a question about this? And we may or may not get into yield analysis later. And I may be dead wrong, and please correct me. But in an OSRD, in order to get to a yield plan, don't you have to figure out what the original layout would have been under our subdivision regulations?
We did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure that we do not remove subdivision from every step in the process. Because in some parts of the process, it's key to get into yield.
Yes, better-
Yes,
maybe
well,
that's
so-
the word.
Within the bylaw, our actual bylaw, it explains the differences. There is a section that talks about the yield plan and the difference between the two, between a site plan and a subdivision. It specifically says that if you're going to do a site plan, then the yield plan is the first thing that the planning board acts on at the public hearing for the site plan.
Yep, okay.
I just want to make sure we don't pull it out of everywhere where it needs to be. But thank you, Dan.
Yep. So I would review each one to make sure that that has the proper, it's at the proper steps and nothing gets removed that needs to be there. Step 5.
Oh, step 5, okay.
Yeah, so the applicant prepares and submits a preliminary subdivision plan, including the development impact statement, to the planning board informed by the above. The preliminary plan shall follow the steps outlined in section 3 below. This is also the time to prepare a yield plan per AZB section 10.1.4. The one thing on that, I think this is only a step if you're going the subdivision route. Because if you're not going the subdivision route, you're not doing a preliminary subdivision plan, the development impact statement is not required, and the yield plan gets acted on at the first public hearing.
And
It sounds to me
please,
like you just have to add another piece, either another step that concerns itself with, in the event that you're not doing a subdivision, that you're doing a site plan review, and using that process, just another step, in this thing.
even within the
Which could
OSRD,
be step 7.
I'm sorry.
Skip 5 and 6 if you're doing a subdivision, if you're doing a site plan or whatever. Go to 7.
Even within the OSRD for subdivision, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I thought there was an option where the applicant could say, no, I want to go direct to the definitive. Doesn't it?
Yes.
But this is a recommended procedure.
Yes.
Okay. But does that need to be reflected here?
It's in the bylaw. That's it.
So
People have an option.
I think they followed that because that's what's traditionally allowed for regular subdivisions. So I think they just followed the traditional subdivision process.
Right.
Did we have a preliminary for a traditional subdivision?
Yes.
We did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Preliminary. You don't have to. So let me explain why this is. So this gets into timing and freezing zoning and stuff like that. Preliminary subdivisions freeze zoning for 8 months. So what you tend to see is applicants who are, trying to do a project and know they won't have enough time to get something passed prior to something going to town meeting that's going to be changed. They will use that as a way to freeze the zoning. Obviously, this is legal. First, so they'll freeze it for 8 months. That gives them the time to be able to work on the full set of plans, go through the process, and get that approved. Then definitive subdivisions freeze zoning for
7 years.
7 years, and then that's locked in. So sometimes people do the preliminary, sometimes people don't. It's really kind of, it depends on what the developer feels, if they need to lock in the zoning or if they don't. It's typically usually what happens.
or if they wanna go through the whole discussion. of
Yeah,
What
to-
the plan, what, get a feeling for things without
Exactly.
a formal vote.
Yep.
So, just to remind everybody, because they may not know, that we actually have a set of subdivision regulations too.
Yes.
So we're actually working with two sets of regulations here.
Yes.
The OSRD, specific to an OSRD, and then the general site subdivision regulations, which cover everything about building a road,
Yeah.
drainage, you name it.
So there's 3 documents that someone needs to reference when you're doing an OSRD.
High level, would you just, for my benefit and hopefully somebody in the audience, differentiate, just give the difference between a subdivision and site plan?
Yes.
Is that just
Yeah, this is
Yes.
good.
So subdivision is usually so it's basically there's a creation of a road, so 50 feet right of way.
town-owned road is going to be part of this development?
Not always. It can be eventually turned over to the town, but not all projects always do get turned over to towns. So basically what it does is it creates a right-of-way in which you can create frontage for new lots. So for an example, if you have a 5-acre property and you want to be able to create new lots, you create the frontage by creating the 50-foot right-of-way, and then you design lots that meet the zoning to conform and create frontage off of that new right-of-way.
And then a site plan.
And then a site plan, so site plan is different in the aspect of site plan does not create right-of-ways. You can't create lots through site plan. That's typically done either under an A&R, you can create lots, new lots, or you have to go through the definitive subdivision process. Then, so typically what we see as site plan is typically retail, commercial, industrial. That's typically what you see, but there is a
Condominiums.
exactly, or condominiums which are residential is another way you can see under site plan. That's usually what you typically see for residential is anything that's multifamily or condo. So like West Union, West
Close enough.
West Main Street. I don't know why I said West Union. West Main Street. That was 172, but it was an apartment built like a big building, site plan review. Lincoln Hills, that's a site plan review application because there's no lots. So typically, that's kind of the difference here.
Thank you.
Can I
Yep.
make a quick comment? So the other side to this is that when we were going through this originally with the OSRD, we didn't want to exclude any property that couldn't build a road. So I think in our minds at the time, we were thinking that typically might land on smaller parcels, but still have the option to get the 50% open space. So if there were a parcel around that's got, like you said, 5 acres, but we still wanted 2.5 acres of open space, or they were willing to work with us on it, by condensing the construction to a smaller piece, you obtain both things. You get the open space and you get the cluster out of it, which saves the land. So it was an option to not force it only into subdivision regulations where you were building lots. Just another way to look at it.
If I may concur with Mr. Diskin, you may recall there was a rectangular lot where a long driveway would get you to the back corner of it and leave the prime conservation land out front in green space. So there wasn't always, and I do appreciate your description, Danny. It was very good.
It was good, yeah.
Right of way and stuff like that. But OSRD also allows a long driveway. That was the intent of it in the beginning.
Yes.
It's a private road, not a road.
Yeah, if through like the OSRD, typically, so you could do a long driveway.
Flexibility.
It gives, like Ken said, it really provides a lot of flexibility so that because of the win-win of it all, you get open space 50% or 40% for non-sewer, and you get density, cluster development, and you're getting all the inventory that you need, and you're preserving the open space.
Right. So Panther Place could have come in as a we can talk about historical.
Yep.
Application. I hope so.
Yes.
Could have been a site plan, and then the road restrictions would have been Non-existent.
There's non-existent, correct.
Less existent.
Yes, less existent, yes, correct, because under our subdivision rules and regulations, I believe 500 feet?
6.
6?
You might have changed it to 6.
Okay, so, yeah, so of a dead end, whereas under site plan, that doesn't apply because it's not a right of way.
When we, recalling Panther Place, when we had the discussion with them, they indicated that that was the kind of construction they wanted to do.
Deeded properties.
We asked them if they would consider 2 families, they said they wouldn't.
Correct.
They preferred the business that they ran and the things that they did were based on what they submitted and it was.
Applicant's decision.
They had a lot of extra open space.
Yeah.
So, every developer may or may not come to us with their business the way they wanna run it. So flexibility, I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever.
So step 5 will need to be also kind of cleaned up or add another step at the end. Step 7, and you're skipping 5 and 6 if you're a site plan.
Something like that.
So the one I don't know if we. So what we'll do is when we're in here in section 10.13 and we're talking about the prior to an application, there's going to be the reference to this section. So I think the best course of action would be is obviously we would first go through the regulations because that one's going to be, what we're referring to within the bylaw. So once we go through all of the regulations and design guidelines, and we've proposed changes and brought it to our public hearing and made the changes, then at that point I think we can then propose town meeting amendments to the actual open space bylaw. Just so that once we know this, we know exactly what we need to just say, excuse me, refer to this section within the regulations.
Just one fallback here too, and this came up. 4.5. The plan, it says the planning board makes written conservation finding and submits to the applicant as guidance. So we use the word, this is where I got into a little discussion at the other meeting. The word guidance is in the regulations, the word findings. And it is in the decision.
Correct.
Is in the bylaw. So the bylaw really takes, I think, precedent here, because this is the regulation.
I agree.
So the way, and typically the way it works is the more strict, the way our bylaw reads is the more strict bylaw or interpretation is the governing.
Exactly, right.
Because really, the conservation findings, they're not guidance, they're obligations.
Yes.
We determined that.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the bigger things that we talked about during.
There was a misunderstanding with.
Because that says guidance.
Anyway.
Which and I understand why, because even in our regulations it says guidelines, which but we have within that says shall. So there's I know the word may sound like, oh, it's a guideline, but when we say shall, it means you will.
And that was a big part of the working group's
Okay.
arguments, discussion.
Yep.
Was where should this pick up strength and where should it just be guidance and where should it be a real obligation?
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, I remember that discussion. Yeah. So what I might have thought was guidance, someone else might have thought should be stricter.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, this is what it's written up now, so we go with that.
So,
Next.
yes, so we can go to, let's discuss the proposed. So, in number 2, in the case of a proposed plan that deviates from the requirements of this section, if the planning board determines that the land with the greatest conservation value cannot be protected except for the use of the OSRD plan, the planning board shall deny a special permit for deviation and require the applicant submit a plan that complies with the requirements of the OSRD. So that's just basically saying that you guys have flexibility in allowing projects to be able to not comply with certain aspects of an OSRD, which is typically allowed within anything that you guys do as a waiver.
Where are you reading from?
The bylaw.
Oh, sorry. Yep, let me switch it back to the bylaw. That is under right here. So number 2. Number 3, the planning board, in consultation with the Conservation Commission, shall study the conservation analysis, may conduct field visits, and shall formally determine which land shall be preserved and where the development may be located. The planning board shall make written findings supporting the determination, the conservation findings. The planning board shall deny any application that does not include sufficient information to make conservation findings, or that does not preserve the land that the planning board determines should be preserved from the development as a result of the conservation analysis and findings. So the one thing in there that I think maybe we need to kind of clarify is, so the planning board shall deny any application that does not include sufficient information to make conservation findings, or, so conservation findings are done before an application even comes to you. So I don't know what that means by you shall deny an application, because the conservation findings will have already happened and been voted on.
In most cases, it almost is a simultaneous thing, I guess.
In what
I guess-
in what
the
sense?
application doesn't have to come in. Yeah, you're right.
And because based on the regulations,
The
Well,
planning board
that's
shall
because-
deny an application.
You got a chicken and egg here, right? You got regulations that say the findings will happen, but the regulations are subject to change.
I think the problem here is the word application. I don't think it's used in the same tone that we
oh,
think of it.
in the same
I think it should be
context.
project, not the
Okay.
application. I think, you know.
Yeah, because the
The
application.
definition of the application
That's
is
the
what you're
right
talking
thing.
about.
I would tend to agree that project is better than application, because if you
Okay.
read the last line of that sentence, as a result of the conservation analysis and findings,
Yeah.
I actually think that sentence has got a lot of bite to it. I just think you're correct, Mr. Diskin, in saying we're beyond an application at this point. It's a project.
No, we haven't gotten to
The application yet, but it's still a project.
Project.
Early.
Yeah, because
The planning board shall deny any project that does not include sufficient information to make conservation findings.
Yep.
Or that does
Like
not
that.
preserve
I mean, I'm
land that the
asking
planning
you,
board
that
determines.
makes sense?
Yeah,
so having it say project makes more sense because
exactly.
yeah, because application to me
It's the whole thing.
is the whole thing is what
Yeah.
the actual process starting at step 6 is.
We're actually dealing with a piece of paper with a drawing on it at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that that sentence does have a lot of bite to it if we work in project instead of application.
Yes.
It basically says to the proponent, you gotta pay attention to the conservation that the board has deemed as important.
I think she has a question.
When are you gonna take questions?
Who has a question?
I
Oh, I'm sorry.
was trying to find, I can't read it from here, so I was trying to find it on my phone.
Oh yeah, it's you can see it right up there. We're talking about this one right here, number 3. So it's 10.13 B number 3.
Are you looking for the URL or do you have the URL?
Oh, I just pulled up the bylaws on my
Oh,
phone.
okay.
So I was just trying to find it and follow along. So
Oh.
I'll find it here. I apologize for interrupting.
10.13, yeah.
Yeah, 10.13 B number 3. So it's under the open space residential development.
Yeah, she's good, she'll find it.
Yeah, I don't know, for some reason it's not showing up on.
So if I may, Danny,
Yep.
if you just go to the bylaw and you click on the left-hand column of numbers 320-10-1,
Yeah.
you get the synopsis.
Yep.
You
I
don't
think.
get the actual whole bylaw, and that may be where this person is.
Okay. Kathleen's helping her right now.
All right.
Um,
Thank you.
Works better with a laptop or a
It does. Yeah.
notebook or notepad.
All right. Okay. So that clears that up. Number 4, the planning board's conservation findings shall be incorporated into its decision to approve with conditions, or deny an application. The conservation findings shall show land to be permanently preserved by a conservation restriction, as well as a recommended conservation uses, ownership, and management guidelines for such land. The conservation findings shall also incorporate or indicate preferred location for development if the plan is denied based upon such findings. So I think that one is pretty, I don't have any issues on that one. And then minimum preserved open space.
This is a loaded question.
Okay.
It's gonna be going, I think it's gonna be later on here, but doesn't, and I think you and Heather have mentioned this to me. That, what's the name of the plan that you do, the base plan of the perimeter of the,
A conservation restriction plan?
no, there's a name for
Oh,
that.
oh, the baseline monitoring report?
Baseline monitoring plan, or whatever. you
Report,
call it.
yeah.
Report.
Yeah, report.
That comes up somewhere along the line, but I don't know exactly.
Yeah,
where.
so.
That's a problem, is what I'm getting at. It's typically difficult. At the-
Yeah, so the baseline monitoring report is not referenced anywhere within our bylaw.
But it's
It
part of
is, it's part of our regulations.
Okay.
Yeah. So our regulations require a baseline monitoring report.
So it's over.
It's also required as part of any conservation restriction, but we don't actually talk about it in here.
So it's assumed that when the word conservation restriction is used in this context, that all the other requirements of a conservation restriction are within it.
Oh, yeah.
In its requirements,
Yeah.
including the baseline monitoring and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And we've run into that as being a complication, I think, in some projects.
Yes. So just to explain what, just for examples, Curly Circle, that project has a CR but does not have a baseline monitoring report. Typically, a conservation analysis gets turned into the baseline monitoring report. That's what our regulations say. The baseline monitoring report is typically required as part of the process for a conservation restriction, because you need to document what the conservation restriction looks like, so that when yearly inspections of that conservation restriction are done, you have context, so that you can tell if there's encroachment here or there or wherever. Our bylaw does not refer to that. Our regulations refer to that. And with Curly Circle, what happened, and I think this is the only issue with Curly Circle, is that happened during COVID. So what happened was, and I was at that point, I was a developer, so I was dealing with the same issue as they were dealing, was trying to get anything approved through the state at that point. You know, working with EOEA is already a slow process. Throwing COVID in at that point, no one was working in the office. They had lost 2 reviewers. The process was just taking forever. So what happened was, the conservation restriction got approved, signed by EOEA, and the Select Board and Conservation Commission, but the baseline monitoring report was never part of that. It was something that was missed by all parties. Which,
How do we make that happen again? That's the important part.
how do we make that not happen again?
How do we make it use that same process so we don't have to worry about the
Well,
baseline monitoring?
But you need the baseline
That's what I'm
monitoring.
saying.
No, you need the baseline
All
monitoring
right,
report.
okay, let's move on. That was good. Thank you. Very good.
Okay. The next one is C. Minimum preserved open space. The plan shall show at least 50% of the tract will be preserved by conservation restriction for a tract of land preserved by public sewer, or 40% if the tract of land is not served by sewer.
Excuse me, let's pause on that.
Yeah.
So what would that mean? You mean, assuming that they wanted to opt to septic?
Yeah, for septic.
You can't opt for it if you're on sewer, but you can if there's parts of town that don't have sewer.
Exactly,
Well,
wait a minute, that's what I wanna know here.
No, that's not true.
No, I thought the sewer, I thought the town.
You're not required to tie into sewer.
I thought you were in our town, to be honest
Oh,
with you.
maybe you are. Okay,
thought you were.
I'll check with the board of health, with Sam. I don't know. Are you, because we have plenty of properties that are not tied in.
They were never tied.
Sandy
No,
Pond
they never
Road.
tied.
I'm
Sewer came
gonna
right-
jump in, because this is happening when we moved to town, and I was curious about it. The town did not make it a requirement that existing private sewer connect.
But anything
All
in the
new.
future?
All new connects if it has availability to it. And we can get pretty
Okay.
creative with force mains and stuff, so.
Okay, all right. I didn't, that's, so,
And that
It
explains,
This-
would have lost a lot of support if they required everybody in town to connect, because it was
Who
expensive.
never had it.
yeah,
They
so
already had a house before the sewer.
this would really only come into, certain areas, like up Fitchburg Road past the NOAA.
think it may be way out on Westford Road someplace.
Westford,
No, it's there.
no,
now.
no,
It's now
there's-
it's there, yeah.
Willow Road.
Willow Road at the very, very end. No, now they put a couple of pipes down there, actually.
So I honestly, I can only think of one area, and that's up past the Noah project up on Fitchburg Road. That's the only place I can think of.
It almost doesn't apply, but it's there.
But it's there.
It's okay.
Yeah, that's gotta go up past Robert Shirley Road, yeah, it's way up there.
Yeah. So the proportion of the jurisdictional wetlands and steep slopes as defined below, which can be included in the minimum required preserved area of open space, shall be directionally proportional 1-to-1 the percentages in such areas found in parent parcel. So I actually ran into this issue here, on which I'm going to raise steep slopes. There is no definition for steep
What's
slopes.
defined as 25%.
But what is steep slopes?
That's it. If the slope is over 25%, but it's got to, I think there's a square footage involved, isn't it 2,000 square?
No. That's not what that says.
Steep slopes.
scroll so I can
Yes.
see the
Yep.
It says that steep slopes comprise 25%. It doesn't say a steep slope is a 25% slope.
Correct.
Oh, it's over here then.
I looked in there. We could not find it.
Okay.
There's no actual definition. There's references of steep slopes within that.
Amen.
But we had a lot of trouble figuring this out. I think what was intended by that was, based on what I found. So it says minimize crossing of steep slopes 15% plus with roads and driveways. That's all that says. But 15% is in parentheses.
Yeah, I'm not, okay, where do you find it?
Regulations.
Further on?
So in the regulations on page 17, which I will pull up here. Page 17, number 2, under 3, under citing principles.
So that's the closest we got is right there.
That's the closest we get to on something. So minimize the crossing of steep slopes 15% plus with roads and driveways. That's the closest thing we get to a definition. But that doesn't also necessarily tie up like with other like what most people would interpret of a steep slope. But I don't know. I don't know what the board or the working group intended by that. So that's
The working group intended that to mean 15, if the slope was steeper than 15%, it was a steep slope, but it's not over here.
so that's something I think we just need to add within our regulations of definitions. What a steep slope is.
And if you say 15%, I believe you mean 15 feet of rise over 100 feet of run.
Yep.
Yes.
15%.
Yes.
Good, I just want to make, so everyone's on the same page, thank you.
Yep. So I think within our regulations under definitions, we should add a steep slope.
Yeah, we should. And define it. Do you want it, what is it, anything greater than 50%?
15%.
Right, 15?
So-
I said 15.
Well, let's think about it.
So
Make a recommendation.
yeah, it's
We'll
something
make a
that
recommendation?
yeah we'll talk about that in the future. But it's just these are things that I want everyone to start thinking about because eventually when we get to the point where we want to work on making these amendments, I want everyone to be well versed in this bylaw.
And I would ask the question, if we start talking about slope, how much area in town is impacted by that of the currently undeveloped land?
But
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, but I'm sure GIS could give us a quick rundown on
Yeah, probably.
one way or the other.
Yeah.
So we should find what makes sense for our little bird here.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we can check. There's other towns I'm sure
Yeah,
have
I'm
that.
sure other towns also have. And there's also no definition of open space.
So, okay, before we get there.
Definitely definition of
No, there's not.
For that,
I have scoured this thing back and forth.
for that can of worms.
Sorry.
I found it before. I made an issue of it before.
It's just, I just want to understand with that sentence in the bylaw,
Mm-hmm.
under C,
Under C. Yep.
the proportion of
There's open space.
wetlands and slopes which can be included in the preserved area shall be directly proportional to the percentage of area found in the
Not in the OSRD.
parent parcel.
Mm-hmm.
So this is saying that one for one, I can have, where I'm developing, I can have steep slopes, and where I'm preserving, as long as they're equivalent.
Equitable.
Yep.
And I can have wetlands
Mm-hmm.
in my developed area, as long as I have equal or more.
Yep.
In my open. That's
Yep. That's exactly.
so
what
we wanna call out
because
steep slopes.
We don't want them to dump all the crappy land into the open space, right?
I wouldn't.
Steep slopes.
Oh, wait a minute, you're a naturalist, you never say that.
But you know what I
All
mean.
land
Is that a technical term we're not familiar with?
This came up.
I agree. I understand what Jonathan's saying. Yes, I agree. It's basically they don't want open space just to be wetlands and steep slopes.
Right.
They want to make sure that there's actual land that's usable.
Oh, so it's the
Came
other
up with
way.
our house
It's
project.
the other way,
Came up with-
Nathan.
That if you put some steep slopes into your open space, you have to have some of them in your developed space.
Yes. Yeah, it's so that you don't use all of the buildable land and just say, oh, you can have all the wetlands and all of the steep slopes.
Crappy land.
You're hiking.
Yes.
We like steep slopes,
It's-
actually.
But yeah.
Nathan, it's like Deuteronomy. You can't slaughter the stuff you don't like. You got to have the perfect. You understand what I'm saying?
Your best sheep.
That's right.
I
The
got
best
it.
stuff.
Not that hurts.
Okay, because so we still want to call out these features, wetlands, steep slopes, because steep slopes are undesirable to a developer. And so we do want to call, I'm just,
Yeah.
instead
Yeah, so steep slopes are very difficult to develop.
Fine.
They are.
Because typically what happens is you're either cutting into that slope
Yep.
or you're blasting into that slope
Yep.
to create a flat area.
Yep.
And then you end up with a giant retaining wall or building a house into the slope, or you're building a building into the slope.
Yeah.
But most developers don't want to do that.
Yeah, there's a large development, Indian Ridge in Westford, all up on ledge
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh, yeah.
slopes. It's fascinating to drive through there.
Indian Ridge?
Yeah, I think
That might be in,
Westford.
Westford?
Okay, thank you.
So-
I just. Yep. Sorry. Go ahead.
So where are we? We're on C or still? Or
Yeah, C.
So it seems like we
Um,
need definitions for steep slope
Yep.
and for open space. I think we just got to clarify that.
I think there needs to be, because the definition that he refers to is
I'm referring
the one that you showed me.
to, that's a lot.
Yeah. So we have open space spoken in talked about in our table of use regulation, our dimensional regulations and stuff like that. That's what this one is really talking about.
Mhm.
But there is a sentence which I think was left over from our old cluster development. Open space within a cluster or open space development is prohibited from development. That's the only thing that it says regarding that kind of open space. I just think we need to have a detailed open space definition for our regulation so that we all understand we're working with the same definition of open space. Because I know there was concern as to whether or not we have the same interpretation of what open space is.
In particular, here's the hot one. It's really going to come down to. By definition, does open space mean public access? That's where it's going to really hit the road. Do you see what I'm saying? Can you have open space that doesn't have public access, or is open space always defined as space that is publicly available?
So
Another
no.
discussion.
I mean, it is another discussion, but like, open space can be open. It doesn't necessarily need to have public access.
Okay,
Correct.
but those are the kind of things we need to make clear because.
Which
that can get confusing.
we actually talk about that within. We only talk about it within our density bonus, but technically, open space does not need to have public access. We do allow for it not to have it.
More broadly, when you get to the use regulations for A1, A2 GR, you have 25% and 30% coverage.
Yep.
Which means you have 70 and 75% open space.
Mhm.
So my backyard is open space, and it's private.
Yep.
Right, if you're gonna define open space broadly, then
And
it would
that's-
include
that's-
people's backyard.
That's the key.
That's the key
That's
point.
the key.
That's the key point I'm making.
That is key, right?
Open space within our table of use regulations, or our dimensional requirements, is exactly that, open space. Anything that's not impervious, basically. There's a difference when it comes to our OSRD,
Right.
and that's what I think we want to nail down
Yeah,
on.
we do.
Is creating a definition in which we feel
Okay.
fits with our OSRD.
Within these regulations,
Yes.
without having to put it in.
Yep. To add it to the definition section of our.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Okay. The maximum number of dwelling units. The maximum number of residential units in an OSRD is determined through a submission of a yield plan, which is essentially a plan meeting most of the standards of a preliminary subdivision plan according to Ayer's rules and regulations governing the subdivisions of land, with some additional information as described below. The yield plan shall show the maximum number of lots and or dwelling units, base lot / unit yield that could be placed upon a site in the conventional subdivision in conformance with all the applicable provisions in the Ayer zoning bylaw, subdivision, and all the other requirements.
Now, does it still apply when the OSRD is with a site plan rather than a subdivision?
Yes.
One second. You
Yes.
see where I'm getting at?
Yes. Well,
Earlier.
does it? Does it? Okay. let me-
To help, yep.
I'm so sorry, I just don't know what document you're referring to when you're reading off. What piece is it? The
So we're-
bylaws?
Yep, the bylaw. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for pulling
Air
that.
zoning bylaw.
Section 10.1.4 of the bylaw.
Thank you so much, I'm so sorry.
No, that's
Nope,
okay.
Sorry.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Just a
Does it right there, next
Question.
paragraph.
for order. How much of this are we gonna go through, and do you have a sense of the time we'll spend on this tonight?
Yeah.
You know,
Do you want? I can speak to the specific ones I really wanted to talk about.
so let me talk about time. I intend this meeting to be earlier than usual. There are times when we have to put in extra hours, and everyone does that. Well, I won't say gleefully, but they do it willingly. And we went through a really rough meeting, you know, and it's exhausting. And out of respect to everyone's time, there are days when we stay late, and we have to, but there are other days when we don't have to stay late, we get to leave a little earlier. I'd like to wrap this up. Can we do this, 7:30, 7:45?
Yeah, I'm gonna get right to the points of the
45.
important ones that I want to make sure we speak about, and then.
We'll answer his question first right away, because it's in the next paragraph.
Oh yes, yeah, you're right. It does say that in the next paragraph. So it says that in cases where the proposed development does not involve subdivision or original tract of land, an OSRD application, a yield plan is still required.
Okay.
And
I just wanted that in the record. Thank you.
Are you still on this page?
Paragraph 2?
I just wanted to be sure.
So where I-
Thank you, sir.
right here. In case the original tract plan.
You see where I'm going?
Okay, thank you.
is still required.
I didn't see it either.
Just to make another comment on this.
Please, sir.
What's fascinating about this statement is that when you go into another section, the site plan section of the bylaw,
Yep, 3.5.
it says it again there. So basically, even in the site plan, if you come in with site plan, there's some requirements for open space. There's under a 3.11, I think it is.
3.5.
3.1.
3.5 is site plan review.
3.5.
I believe 3.5.
Oh, excuse me. I think it might be in the multifamily section of the bylaw.
That's 10.2.
It
Yeah.
refers to open space being a requirement in a number of different areas.
Yeah, yes. I think, but the yield plan is only required as part of the.
Correct, you're right, the yield plan, right.
Because under multifamily, you don't calculate under a yield plan. Yeah.
space, I should have stayed with yield.
Yeah, multifamily calculates under site plan review.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, which is how the board actually used to calculate
Correct.
projects.
I'm
More
going. Oh, I'm
mathematics.
sorry, Kathleen.
So on that note, when you say sorry, maybe now I'm jumping ahead to C. So.
Oh,
if
yep.
you're gonna
Nope,
jump
you're
ahead.
good. You're good.
Okay. Is land available for development the foil of open space?
Land developers again?
No.
So, is land available?
Shall be included as land.
No, because there could be easements that you can't develop.
So yeah, because that's the question that I was getting
Next
at.
paragraph.
Can
Oh, she's in the next
easement
paragraph.
Yeah,
Count towards open space.
Yes.
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Okay, so in our definition of open space, we can include easements.
Yeah, so with it, and this is
Sorry,
where-
this is
no. This is a good question because this actually came up at our meeting. This is one of those difficult questions in the sense of there's a lot of you got to reference a lot of different documents to get to this, but in our OSRD regulations, which I just pulled up, there are some that are not allowed to be counted towards open space. So it says, unless permitted by the planning board, the area within power line and other public utility easements cannot be counted towards the minimum required percentage of open space in OSRD subdivisions. And then,
It's basically the same thing.
yeah, so easements can be considered within the open space as long as it's not a power line or a public utility.
Okay.
Wait a minute, but this is what we're gonna have a lot.
Well,
Yeah, this is gonna get heavy.
unless permitted by the board,
So the-
which I made sure at the beginning it says unless permitted by the
And
board.
if you jump right back to the bylaw, however,
No land that is usable.
and the easement can so say you have a public utility easement.
Yep.
True or false? That can neither count towards the land available for development nor the open space. So does that artificially shrink?
No, so
No land that is.
technically it's part of the land, but you can't develop it. So this is where I was gonna get to and explain. Our OSRD makes a lot of references based on how we used to calculate things.
Okay.
We used to calculate under site plan review, under 3.5.4 on how we used to calculate how many units you're allowed. And this is a reference to the old way of how we used to calculate it, because within the old way, you can't count that. You have to remove that as part of your calculation to how many units you can get. Whereas in here, technically it is allowed within our regulations. It allows us to have, it's still part of the land, but you can't have it within the open space if it's a power line or a public utility.
Right. And it's not like you can develop a public utility easement with houses. So
Well, you can put roads on
Sure,
sometimes.
but-
You can there's lots of other ways you can develop, but
Okay.
necessarily building, no, you're right.
okay.
Typically, no.
All right. So
But-
the moral of the story is it doesn't shrink.
No, it does not shrink. It's still part of the land.
All right. Thanks. I think Ken was talking when I.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm not satisfied with this conclusion, so let's go back to this paragraph. Let's go back to this paragraph.
With which conclusion?
Let's go back to the paragraph here in the bylaw. No land that is unusable for building due to being subject to an easement. Unusable for building, so it's got a restriction on it already.
Yep.
So we're gonna assume that that's probably an easement that's already on the land
Yep.
when the person gets it, just for clarification. It's not an
Yes.
easement that's created later.
Right, understood.
Or it's an easement that had to be put on the yield plan. Could it be that? In other words, you had to put an easement on the yield plan when you were doing the calculations, so therefore it becomes unbuildable. Or it's unusable. So you have to create an easement to get to a drainage outfit. You have to create an easement to get.
But a yield plan doesn't have that.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I'm saying this is all under the yield plan section, basically.
It's under the maximum units of dwelling
Otherwise,
units
legally
section,
restricted.
not under the yield plan section.
You have to keep it in the development area.
Yield plan is the next section.
Maximum number of dwelling units. Well, land use.
This is where I think it was a reference to the old
We did the
way we
mathematics.
calculated it, and what was all that was done was we added the yield plan portion at the, like, it was just revised to add the yield plan.
Okay. And then we went over to you talked about this as well? The question regarding the public utilities, easements and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's what she was, I think that's what she was just asking, and that's what I was clarifying on. Power line or public utility.
And you said, it says unless permitted by the planning board. This is
Yep,
the important
correct.
thing.
Yep.
The area within power line and other public utility easements cannot be counted to the minimum required percentage of open space. So that's open space discussion rather than the yield plan discussion.
Correct.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yep, yep.
Thank
So we're getting close, so I'm just gonna specifically start getting on the important ones that I think we need to get to.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, all of this is something we need to
Yeah, but the
discuss,
stuff that's contentious.
let's,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say contentious, but I think it's the things that we need to, the biggest issues that need to be addressed. 10.1.5, density bonuses. This whole section needs to be completely rewritten. Thank you. Sorry, I keep forgetting to update this. Needs to be looked at and fixed. So the first one, the unit count determined by section 10.1.4 may be increased through the density bonuses in order to advance important goals of the Ayer Master Plan, Ayer Open Space Recreation Plan, and other planning documents approved by the planning board on file in the planning department. So density bonuses are given by special permit at the discretion of the planning board based upon the expected public benefit. They are calculated by first determining the allowable unit count under section 10.1.4 without rounding fractionals up and down, and then multiplying by 100% plus the percentages that follow. Resulting fractional units, if any, shall be rounded up or down as in section 10.1.4. So this section still makes reference to how we used to do as the under site plan review, by that multiplication by the 100%. When under site plan review, we used to,
Under subdivision as well. Not just site plan, we did this under subdivision. That's how we did the first few. We did the mathematics. We took the total square footage, divided it by the square footage of the underlying district.
yeah, but that, no.
No, we did that in the first OSRD.
I looked at
No?
Curly
Okay.
Circle and I looked at Shaker Mill Pond. The way you guys calculated it was based off of site plan review, maximum dwelling units calculation.
Okay.
Under 3.5.
That was
5.8.
mathematics, it was
Yeah,
advisory.
yeah, so there's,
Total
there,
and mass.
yeah, because you're subtracting, there was subtraction of wetlands, and so you got not whole numbers, because it was based on how many, you'd get fractional numbers, and I think the 100% was to multiply and get rid of the fractional numbers.
Okay,
Based on based on my review of all the old OSRDs. You were
Not all of them,
multiplying,
just-
no, except for the newest one, which was Panther Place.
Right.
Based on that needs to be removed completely out of there, because there is no way you can produce a yield plan with fractional numbers at all. You can't
under
have
the requirements today.
yes, you can't have a half conforming lot.
Right.
You're getting a whole number every time.
We get it?
No, I get that.
So that 100% needs to be completely removed out of the bylaw.
What would it be then?
It's removed. There's nothing.
So how do you, what
No,
is
you
the
just take that
calculation for the yield then?
No,
No, that
we've
has
already
nothing
done
to-
the yield plan.
We've already done the yield plan.
Done under 10.14. We're into the density bonuses now.
Okay.
We're
We
into
skipped
the
right
dens-
over didn't have to do that.
Yeah, the yield plan. I don't know if you guys want to go through each requirement. I mean, it's not.
The yield plan basically says, layout of standard subdivision, give us all the lot sizes, give us the frontage.
Show that it's buildable,
So that
basically.
It's buildable. It's gonna give us a count. You get a count. Then you go to the density bonuses if they want.
Hey, can you show me specifically where that's stated under yield plan requirements? What you're
What?
talking about? That math that you're talking about.
What math?
It goes right there under the 10.14, the very first paragraph.
Yep.
The maximum number of residential units in the OSRD is determined through a submission of a yield plan.
Okay, and that yield plan shall show the maximum number of lots and/or dwelling units that could be placed upon the site in a conventional subdivision, right?
Right.
But that's, to get there in a conventional subdivision, there's some math, right?
No, you just draw the road out. You have to
You just
draw
draw
all
the
the
road
roads
out.
have to be the right, well,
It has to meet all the zoning requirements. It's this. It has to meet these.
And then you get that.
Yeah, and then you
Period.
get that. Because you can't, for you to be able to, so the way it works is when you're creating a yield plan, you have to meet numbers 1 through 13, I'll bring this back up here,
Yep.
of the yield plan requirements. Under the yield plan requirements, you got to meet all of these requirements.
Okay.
At that point, that gives you how many lots you can get if you
Okay.
you meet every one of them.
Okay.
But the question, there's within our 10.1.4 still makes reference to number of lots and or dwelling units, because there is an ability to be able to get more dwelling units than like you can do duplexes on a
Right, you can get more units if you do, right.
exactly.
And we won't, right, and that's encouraged.
Yes.
I-
So that's why there's a reference to and or dwelling units.
Okay, that's fine.
But the multiplying the number of 100%, I think that just needs to be completely removed out of this section, because we no longer have fractional numbers. There's no, you're getting a whole number no matter what you do in the yield plan.
Okay.
So now that 2 families are by right,
Yep.
I would do my yield plan with 2 families all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't do it with multis, assuming.
Yeah, because multis are not by right; they're special permit.
Got it.
All right.
Okay, so
Isn't
no.
the important part about this 10.15, the fact that the density bonuses are basically just the way it spells it out, given by special permit at the discretion of the planning board,
Yep.
based on the expected public benefit.
Period.
Then the rest, that should have been it right there.
Yeah. Everything else needs to be stricken.
The rest was a reference to
Our
an old
old.
way of doing it, where we
Yeah.
had more mathematics involved.
Yes.
Rather than the yield plan, which gives you the count.
Correct.
And then the planning board starts from that count.
Yep.
Makes a determination one step at a time on the density bonuses.
Yes.
Whether we're gonna allow them by special permit.
Yep. Correct.
Thank you.
So the first one is if the applicant allows deeded public access to the open space portion of the property, and the planning board finds that such public access provides a significant recreational benefit to the town, such as an access to an important natural area or trail system, that is a maximum of 10%.
And it's at the board's discretion?
All density bonuses are at the discretion.
Excuse me, where it says, hold on, let me finish my sentence, please. The point, significant recreational benefit. In other words, if an applicant just says, yeah, there's public access, but we find the open space has nothing that would attract people, we might say, no, there's no
10%.
density benefit, there's nothing here. Just because, do you understand the distinction I'm making? Just because the applicant says, yes, there's public access to it, doesn't mean that it's instantly a public access density bonus. We have to determine it provides us, that it's access to a significant recreational benefit.
Like a trail system or
something.
important natural area. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're all in agreement on that.
Rock to climb on.
Oh, we need a definition. There's a place.
Well, that's what I say. Right now, it looks like
Significant public.
I don't think we can get into a definition.
No, we're not
I
gonna
think
get it
it's-
tonight.
I don't think you could. Yeah, of course.
It's a discretion.
It is a discretion on our part
Special
that
permit, we discuss it.
we say, is this okay, good. I just wanted to bring that
Yeah,
up.
no, I don't think you could define significant recreational benefit to the town.
No, I don't think so.
I don't know how you could, because everyone's gonna have a different interpretation.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So that one I think is fine to say. Number 2.
Yeah, what about that?
This one is, I think, just needs to be. Sorry. Number 2 needs to be completely removed as well, or we refer to our new inclusionary housing bylaw. Because this calculation here is no longer in conformance with our new inclusionary housing.
So, yeah, so when we,
I would also ask, does this conform with the OHLC? Is that gonna be a problem also? But I agree, we should discuss this.
in essence, if
What do you-
we had, when we did the inclusionary housing, we probably should have gone further to look at this section as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Now that it's coming up for the real deal.
Yeah,
But we could have looked deeper into where that change affected.
where that change
other
affected,
things.
yeah. I think that was, it was definitely something of an oversight. there's going to be a lot of times where, as we can see, it happens, you know, where things get changed and other sections within the bylaw don't get changed. Specifically for this one, should get changed because one, our requirement for or our density bonus for inclusionary housing is now 1 to 3 because our requirement is 10%.
Yeah, we changed the bonus,
Yeah, we
To
changed the
3.
bonus to 3.
but we minimized the requirement to 1 in 10 from 1 in 5 and up the bonus
Yeah.
if they gave us 1.
Yep, correct. For every 1 additional above the affordable requirement, you can have up to 3.
So I guess we're gonna have to get it, when we get into this, if and when we get into it in the real time, we'll have to make a conclusion as to
Yeah.
which applies.
Yeah, so that's the one thing that I still am kind of not sure because if we apply logic, it would say the more restrictive one would have to apply, but that then doesn't conform with our inclusionary housing bylaw.
Yeah, so we'll make a decision. when we
So
get there.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's going to be up to the board it's going to be up to the board as to determine which one it needs to be.
I mean, we could reach out to town council for that as well, right, at that point in time?
First, you go to the zoning enforcement officer, then to town council.
Okay,
That is the process.
All right. So that has to be rewritten regardless. Either way.
Yeah. Completely rewritten or stricken. I don't. Maybe it's just a refer to section this for the affordable density bonus.
Okay. Number 3.
Number 3, I think that one is fine. If the applicant preserves his permanent open space more than the minimum required percentage, a maximum of 10% density bonus per additional 5% of the parcel preserved as open space.
can I go back to something before we jump over it,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, I'm listening.
So, the other thing I think is very important to remember here is you're always working from the number that you accomplished from the yield plan.
Right.
So you go to the yield plan, you got a number. Then you
Right.
say, okay, what's 10% of that number? If you max out this thing, you get that many units. So you go one step at a time, but every single one of these, you start from the base number that results from the
Yeah.
yield plan.
Yeah. You're not working off
You're not
of.
just multiplying it again.
Yeah, and actually,
again,
and it actually does clarify in.
You got that, what I was talking about, what I mean by that?
It did, so in A, it says percentages plus the percentages that follow.
Right, but what I was.
And we're
getting-
striking that.
Well, so we will in the future, but currently, that's not how it's spelled out. So I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you, that's how it should be. But that's not,
We have
It's
we have
not what this
precedent of it,
says.
so we have.
So
So,
I understand.
you're thinking this is cumulative?
I don't agree,
Whoa.
I don't
No,
agree,
I
I
think
don't
so.
agree with that. I'm
No.
saying, that's not how it reads.
So keep,
Needs to,
That's
okay.
why there's a lot of these issues which I'm trying to
All
point
right.
out to everybody. We need to change these.
Well, exactly. That's why I don't like this, up to the maximum of 20% of the allowable unit count. No,
Yeah, the
that
allowable-
language makes no sense. The allowable could be cumulative, so no, the
allowable-
initial.
no, that's actually right.
I get where you're coming.
That one's actually correct. It says allowable unit
you-
count under section 10.4.
I get his concern though.
You see what I'm saying?
But I
No,
can bring it
again-
up, that's why I brought it up.
it's gotta be, we're gonna fix that section anyway.
Yes, it's going to be fixed. That one's going to be.
3 is fine,
3 is fine.
and 4 we're just gonna.
Well, so that whole so now it is part of the building code. It is required, but it's still within our bylaw.
Solar ready is required, but
Yeah,
not the
solar
rest
ready.
of it.
Oh, yeah. Well, so you have a definition for solar-ready construction.
Right, but the important part's the first sentence.
Yeah, I agree.
If the applicant has designed the development to
Yep.
protect solar access and agrees to provide solar ready. So solar ready is the second component.
Correct.
Design the development to protect solar access is the
what's that
drift of
mean?
it.
So solar access basically is making sure. Typically, what you do is there's a sun diagram, sunshade diagram, so you determine like how much of the house gets hit with sun versus shade, times of days and stuff like that.
So they need two things.
Well, they need, yeah.
The solar-ready construction, which is one thing, which is
Which
already in there.
required.
What's the thing that's additional here is the development itself, protect solar access part,
Yes.
where the units are actually oriented in the correct way.
Yes.
And trees
Right.
aren't planted.
No, I know it says, I'm saying it out loud for the benefit of the record.
Yep.
So that this could still be relevant because it's not just the solar readiness, it's solar readiness plus the protecting of the solar access.
Yes. So I think the one section that maybe it needs to be rewritten, or maybe it's the talking apart. So the purpose of this section, yada, yada. So the solar ready construction shall mean construction of the homes in such a way that I think the solar ready construction portion can be removed because it's already required.
Okay.
Building code
Yeah.
already requires.
May I ask a question about that? Then if we remove it, will they get bonus units for it or not? Or where did the bonus number come from?
Oh, I
We may
think.
pull the whole thing out.
Well,
Still
it,
need a number to multiply by.
Well, so
Still a
that's-
percentage number.
I'm in agreement with you, Jeff. So, one, the maximum percentage that would be based off of if you can have a plan showing that the whole development is solar. What's the word?
That's gonna be my next question.
Yes,
The solar-
protect solar access.
Solar ready and solar capable are very different conversations.
Right,
Correct.
solar access.
Yes.
Because, and if I may, we don't want to be in a situation where we're turning to conservation saying, we're gonna cut down all the trees to make it solar.
Protected, yeah.
We'll never get there.
This is very difficult to make both work.
It is.
Almost impossible, actually.
It
It's
is.
a balancing act. Yep.
This
Thank
one,
you.
the other problem with this one is the percentage, 20, I don't know how we left 25% in there. It's just nuts.
I don't know. All I
At
know
the
is
time,
it's there.
at the time.
Oh, that, we were being
no-
driven by the state requirements to have more solar everywhere. That was a concept.
So I think, we actually examine that then in our discussions, whether the maximum 25% makes sense or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And maybe strike the solar ready part, that in order to get it, because that's part of the building code anyway,
Yeah.
that they have to protect solar access by the orientation. Most people are not gonna take up on that because it's so damn complicated, and then because you have to juggle that with everything else you gotta get, the water, stormwater, et cetera. Yeah.
Well, so typically there's, the diagrams aren't hard
Yeah.
to do. It's the design of the actual layout.
Yes, I know.
Which is more
It
difficult.
get tricky.
Yeah, of course, yes.
That's what I mean.
It's a little bit
It's
more.
harder.
Yeah,
What you're
but
saying
that's
is, at the end of the day, the lot has certain geological
Yeah.
constraints. There's only so much housing that will go on it.
Any lot.
Any lot.
yeah.
We
And-
did this with Panther Place, and we ended up making a compromise. You saw that, right? There
Yep.
was some kind of a compromise. And I don't think you ever took advantage of the benefits, but it was a condition that basically said, we think he was before the zoning change. Excuse me, he was before the,
After.
no, he was after solar access was required? I thought he was right around.
Oh.
Yeah, he was right around the time when the state was reviewing the requirements for the building code. And so.
Oh yeah, no. Solar came out last year.
Right, so he was gonna put in solar ready no matter what, because he liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was part of his design for all his plans, part of his
He
marketing
showed us a
plan.
drawing for it.
That was there.
Right, he gave us a drawing and showed us that. So we made a compromise. We said, you've showed us the drawing, we believe that, but you haven't showed us the whole
The sun diagram,
layout, because
yeah.
we didn't have to look at the houses. We're only looking at the lots.
I know.
So he didn't owe us an obligation to lay every house on every lot. So as a result, we put a condition, if he came back later type thing,
Yeah.
he would get the bonuses.
Correct.
Didn't really need it.
So, what I want to ask Danny is there substantive
Yeah, there's
discussion for
just one-
permitted housing types and the other?
Yeah.
Because I'd like to get to,
Yeah.
or can we?
There's really not that much more. I just.
We just want to do that, and then I want to get to approval of the minutes, and then we can go home.
Yeah. So the next one, 10.1.6, the permitted housing types. So this actually came up at our Stratton Hill project. Two families are so duplexes are no longer special permit requirements.
Mhm.
So the allowable residential units may be developed as single, two-family, or multifamily dwellings, provided that the applicable special permit or site plan review requirements for the land use district are satisfied, that the number of dwelling units do not exceed the allowable unit count in 10.1.4. Above, the subdivision approval of the special permit site plan requirements shall be fulfilled concurrently in one of the proceeding to extent practical. And the OSRD application involving two families and multifamily dwellings shall include a site plan that shows the location, layout, height, and setbacks for such dwellings. So, on this one, special permits are only required for multifamily.
Yeah, we're discussing bylaws, that's all.
I'm keeping the code. Jeff,
Oh,
we're listening. Hi, Bonnie.
I muted him. Don't
Okay.
worry.
it's okay.
You're good.
She's great.
So on this one, I think it just needs to be rewritten in a way to specify. So only multifamily is the one that needs special permits. Not single and two family. We required two families for Shaker and for Stratton, because those were the only ones that have proposed any two families.
We issued him a special permit.
Yep.
The planning board did.
Yep, correct. But we told them that they had to apply for it. And there was discussion during that hearing whether or not it was necessary because it's by right. Technically, because at the point when they had submitted, they were previously required special permits. So now it's not an issue. Now it's kind of just clarifying that only multifamily on this one is necessary.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Just real quickly. So Danny, for all the things you said, you recommend rewriting. Is the next step, are you going to show us some proposed language that we can review?
Yeah, so the way, like I typically would is, I think, I would want, because this is not everything, I want the board to look at the whole bylaw.
Yeah.
Now you guys have been through this process more than I have.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have learned the ins and out of what works, what doesn't work, what you like, what you don't like. I'm going to want to hear from all of you to tell me what it is that you've learned from that process, what you think needs to be updated and changed. Because these are things that I'm learning as I'm going right now, and I'm bringing to you guys to show you what I think needs to be changed. But there's going to be things that you guys all think as well. You've been through 4 of these now. This is really my first one from start. So I want to make sure I'm getting everyone's input as well. So this is not something that's going to happen really quickly. I think having the board look at this and then having a OSRD regulations discussion specifically on the discussion, also, on the regulations, having you look at those as well will help Heather and myself when we propose these amendments.
Okay.
Because, Heather and I, we're still learning this process here.
I'm just going to go back to permitted housing types for
Yes.
just a moment. So I wouldn't change that at all. And I'll tell you the reason why. I fought really hard for this to get to the zoning change that we got to where we went to special permit by us because of this very wording here where the multifamily was not allowed in the districts that we had the other OSRDs. Yet it said it was an allowed housing type, but because the subset, the table, didn't have it in there. I did this to go to town council
Okay.
at the time. And because we were trying to clarify the fact that in one place in this, we said all housing types were available. So I took it to believe all housing types were available. But then the ruling came back that it had to be in the table as well. So that's where the problem was.
Requirements for the land use district are satisfied.
Exactly. That little sentence that said, provided the applicable, land use district was determined that statement met the table.
Okay.
That's what, and so
Okay.
that's why changing that table was so important.
Okay.
to
So
me,
then,
Because it freed up this ability to do any housing.
okay. So then we don't. You're saying that we don't need to
I don't
change
think you
that.
need to touch it. If it ends up needing a special permit, we do it, whatever it might be. But to me, it works now, because
Okay.
before it didn't work.
Okay.
Good.
I was trying to encourage more multifamily, and I couldn't get it because of the fact that it wasn't allowed because of that little line there.
Okay. And the last one I had, which was on page 122, under section 10.1.8 permanent open space. D, maintenance standards. Reference to CRs. So ongoing maintenance standards shall be established as a condition
Right, the right place?
on page 122
Oh, yeah.
at the top. Ongoing maintenance standards. Let me just move this up here for everyone to see. Right there.
Oh my God.
Actually,
as a
Danny,
yep.
the screen is on the screensaver now.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. It just doesn't bother me. I've got it in front of me here.
Thank you.
But yep. Mm-hmm.
Ongoing maintenance standards shall be established as a condition of the development approval to ensure that the open space land is not used for storage, dumping, refuse, junk, or other offensive or hazardous materials. Such standards shall be enforceable by the town against an owner of open space land, including an HOA. So we don't have any. So based on everyone that I've reviewed at this point, we don't have any maintenance standards that are established as a condition.
Well, we missed it.
But within a CR, there are.
That was a lot, yeah.
So I don't know if this, we just need to refer to conservation restriction or just is this its own thing that we're talking about here?
I think you're just gonna grind it out in the language of the conservation restriction. Just, yeah. That's the way I see it anyway.
Okay.
We have maintenance requirements for stormwater and stuff like that.
Yeah, but not open space.
Particular thing, but it does end up in the conservation restriction.
Kathleen?
I'm just wondering, not knowing the background, but is the intent also that the CR is held by a certain set of individuals, and this is attempting to be slightly more broader, which is saying like, oh, you may have open space that's actually held by an HOA. So if somebody goes and puts a chicken coop on that, we now want to allow the select board to kind of police that.
Yeah, so
I guess I'm saying is if you just point to the CR, it seems like that only applies if there is a CR, but a lot of the bylaw seems to be getting at the fact that open space doesn't have to be held by CR, it can be held by HOA, or it can be held by other.
well, so yeah, let me hold on. There's so I get where you're. So a CR is always required. It's the ownership of the CR.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. So yeah. So it can be held by an HOA. It can be held by anybody. But
okay, so
and that's where that reference comes in because of the including an HOA. An HOA can have ownership of the CR, hold the ownership, but oversight of that CR is not done by them. That's how that works.
I see.
So you can't own the land and oversee the land.
So in my kind of example, say you had a CR that's held by an HOA.
Yep.
By virtue of having that CR, you don't need this, right?
That's how I see it.
All right.
I mean, it's something that I don't know. Maybe I don't know the thought behind it.
Okay.
I know, but like it's just there is confusing. There's no need for it to be there if it's not used.
It was good that it was there because we had something to talk about, and then we
All right.
had a question come out of it.
Mhm.
Was it regular?
Okay.
Okay.
I moved that we.
Oh.
What?
Meeting minutes.
Yes.
Oh.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes with my suggested edits submitted yesterday. What's that? Oh, you did?
Input on this stuff,
Oh yeah. Public input.
public.
Oh, okay. Yes. Do you have any, regarding the topic on OSRD regulations, did you have any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Anyone on Zoom?
Looks quiet.
I see no hands. Going once. Going twice. Sold. All right.
No, you're
I
good.
just wanted to ask, it takes a lot, and I do apologize for interrupting.
You're
but
not
I was just
interrupting.
trying to follow along. If I do have questions, once I process this information, I can reach out and clarify? Okay, I just
Yep.
wanted to make sure.
Yeah, you can feel free to call me and we can talk about whatever.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Did I complete my motion? I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes with my suggested edits for January 28th, 2025 Air Planning Board.
Second.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Ken?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Nathan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
John, can I just ask one quick question based off
Yep.
of last time's meeting? I really won't hold us up. We all know I like to end, but is that just? And we were asked, I think, well-intentioned in that meeting, in the past meeting,
Yep, the last meeting.
to answer a public person's question with a show of hands. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about it because we all had a little bit of side eye and awkwardness. And then I was trying to figure out, well, if I don't remember the answer to the question, is my hand down saying no, or is my hand down saying I don't remember?
I remember it.
Did I miss this?
It's okay. So here's what I'm just going to, you don't have to remember the exact incidents, but
No.
here's what I spent some time thinking because I've learned Robert's rules from this nice group. My understanding is that if the public or anyone on the board or the applicant are asking questions, it's actually always to you as the chair, and then you can decide if it's a question we are referring, and you run a wonderfully welcoming and casual board that I appreciate. However, in that instance, it should have been truly a decision on your part whether we were all show of handsing where we stand on something or whether we've been a part of something, because it really pitted us against each other for something we didn't know where it was going or what the question was. So it was just a technicality of how it happened. And I just think even if an applicant is asking something of us, we usually take a moment to discuss. But I think I just want to remind us, I usually don't like the formality of Robert's rules, but I think it's really important that you get to decide. And I will say it next time. I will speak up. I was caught off guard. That before we're answering a question or feeling uncomfortable, that we should refer to you as to whether you think that's appropriate for us to answer.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I just
I
wanted to
don't
discuss
remember
that.
the incident. so,
Yeah, I think what Julie said is very important because I make the same mistake all the time.
Yeah.
I'm answering people's questions that I shouldn't be answering.
Well, I kind
So
of
I
like that about our
apologize.
board, but I think when we were starting to show
No,
answers
I think we should get a
as
little
a
more
vote,
formal.
it felt a little
I agree, it should be a little more formal.
uncomfortable to me.
I add one thing to that.
What's that?
Would that apply to motions as well? That if a member brings up a motion, the chair should still, has the option to deny the motion?
I don't think so.
No.
No,
Okay.
no,
Okay, so
no, I don't.
motions can be brought up by any member.
I believe so.
Yes.
Yeah, I do
Yes,
believe so.
any board member's allowed to make a motion.
Right.
Okay.
No chair can block that.
No, I don't think so.
Thank you.
There is a limit to my power.
Yep.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, thank you, everybody. Great
Thank you.
discussion this evening. Thank you, Danny.